Hello everyone, friends. There are quite a few oligarchs in the world who are doing everything they can to strengthen and seize power. But among them, one particularly cunning, cynical, and quite productive figure stands out. Specifically, it's George Soros. He is the one who sponsors color revolutions and pulls the strings of traitors in various countries. It is he who, through textbooks and various foundations around the world, creates the sentiments that he and his supporters need. Among the youth, Arabs call Soros a Zionist because he is Jewish. But in Israel, he is considered a traitor because of his support for Palestine. For Russia and China, he fights for the interests of the United States of America. But nevertheless, in America itself, they wanted to recognize him as a terrorist. As Elon Musk said, Soros is a Magneto, an X-Men villain who wants to destroy civilization. And he's partly right. Since Soros advocates for not just Western or American interests, he promotes something else. What exactly? You'll find out now. Soros was born in 1930 in Budapest. By origin, he is a Hungarian Jew. His father helped his fellow Jews hide from the Nazis during World War II by forging passports. But Soros himself took the other side. He managed to work as a courier. He delivered summonses, helping to send people to death camps. Later, Soros's father paid a local official to shelter him, thus saving him from the Holocaust. The new father turned out to be an accomplice of the Nazis, confiscated the property of Jews, and Soros, who was 14 years old, Soros helped his new father. By the way, here's your answer. How can Jews be for the Nazis? It is interesting that he does not feel any guilt and treats everything in this way, like a game on the stock market. If I hadn't done it, someone else would have probably done it. Well, it seems that Soros's immorality was already taking shape back then. After the war, he enrolled in the London School of Economics and then moved to the United States, where he worked at brokerage firms, quite successfully. And in the early 70s, he founded the Quantum Investment Fund. And in the first 10 years, his returns were 33.65% per year. Well, it's important to know that one of the shareholders of the company was the Rothschild family. By 1993, Soros was earning a salary that exceeded the GDP of 42 UN member countries. $1 billion, 100 million. He is known as the man who hacked the Bank of England when the UK was facing a banking crisis. Soros started buying up currency, then sold it all at once, making $1 billion, and at the same time, he crashed the pound sterling. And shortly after, he repeated the same story with the Thai baht and profited from the crisis in Asia. In 1998, Soros predicted the default in Russia, or rather, he received information from American intelligence and played the currency markets. Soros is often accused of using insider information. So, in 2002, a Paris court sentenced him to a fine of €2,200,000 for using confidential information for trading on the stocks of a French bank. In other words, Soros doesn't make money. His speculations are a way to launder and cover up the money that ends up in his funds. And then they are used to promote globalization programs. While Soros was studying in London, he became deeply influenced. Karl Popper's theories about the open society. At its core, it is based on democracy and free movement of capital. There is no censorship. All people are equal. In contrast, there is a closed society or an authoritarian one. It is supposedly based on prohibitions and doomed to degradation. And since then, Soros decided to create a world without borders, where the state does not dominate and where minority opinions are respected. In reality, the removal of the state from the lives of citizens, which Soros's open society implies, is nothing more than the complete power of oligarchs, of which he is one. That is, an open society is not about the freedom of citizens. It's about the freedom of oligarchs from the state, or rather, complete power over people. In general, Soros is an ultra-globalist. How does he differ from globalists? Globalists believe that states should exist, even if they are subordinate to the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. There should be a middle class and a developed industry. The picture of the world that ultra-globalists paint. This is a complete transformation of humanity. In their world, no state but an electronic concentration camp. This is a world of powerful corporations, like the Austin Company, where people are biorobots, without national, racial, religious, or gender differences, and accordingly, complete power for the oligarchs. Having become wealthy, Soros started to turn his dreams into reality. He named his charitable foundation Open Society. And very soon, the organization turned into a transnational network. Today, its branches are located in 38 countries. Their stated goal is to assist in the creation of an open society in totalitarian states. Well, more precisely, in states where there is sovereignty from the West and its oligarchs. And they always operate according to the same script. In an undesirable country, humanitarian funds are created that pump people with ideas of democracy and supposedly freedom, equality, and brotherhood. This has been observed in many countries. The most well known for us are Georgia, Armenia, and Ukraine. The so-called Soros still rule everywhere there. In Armenia, it's Pashinyan. In Georgia, it's Prime Minister Kabakidze. And before him, it was Saakashvili. Well, as for Ukraine, I think it's pretty clear. Soros funds programs that erase the differences between genders. And there are already about 300 genders counted there. He advocates for sexual education for children. In the framework of gender equality, it defends the rights of people, primarily those of the LGBTQ community. He is calling for the legalization of marijuana and has allocated $1 million for this. And he is also the main financier of abortions around the world. So far, $23 billion have been spent on such charity. Migrants are also under Soros's patronage. Millions of dollars are sent in support of them. Interestingly, in 2015 he proposed a plan for Europe, according to which the European Union should accept 1 million refugees a year and allocate 15,000 euros to each one. But this doesn't really look like love for people. Rather, it's about the dilution of national states. One of the steps of globalization. The indigenous population is being replaced by migrants, so that various countries don't have national pride, so that the people don't have the desire to defend their country. And you could do anything with her. But this is actually partly what's happening today. Look at Germany, how it's being used. For example, they can't buy cheap gas because the United States prohibits them from doing so. They buy everything they need from Russia with joy. Are there any Germans who can protect Germany's interests? No. Migrants contribute to this very well. This, by the way, became one of the reasons why Soros was pushed out of his native Hungary. The foundation's branch opened there first, in 1984. Prime Minister Viktor Orban stated outright that the billionaire has a plan to fill the country with refugees and destroy the nation. Next, Soros came to China in 1986. But after 3 years, he had to get out of there. The Chinese authorities refused to cooperate with the foundation. According to the Ministry of State Security, Soros's personal representative in China was a CIA agent. Plus, the leadership included 4 citizens of the United States who were also connected to American intelligence. In 1987, Soros reached out to the Soviet Union. Soros money flowed into science. By 2003, he had spent $1 billion in Russia. Almost 65,000 people received grants from him. He funded scientific projects, openly stating that his goal in the Soviet Union was to turn a closed society into an open one. In the 1990s, Soros organized the publication of a pro-Western textbook. There was not a single line in it about the Battle of Stalingrad. There were whole paragraphs about the United States' victory over Japan, but nothing about Germany's surrender. In 1995, media discussions emerged that Soros was contributing to brain drain and harming Russia. The State Duma of Russia conducted an inspection and expressed gratitude for the contribution to the development of domestic science. It's important to understand that at that time, by the way, when the so-called communists had a relative majority in the State Duma, and when Soros was thanked, our country was essentially a classic colony of the West. Today it has already been calculated that only for the training of those scientists who left Russia, the West would have spent $1 trillion, not to mention the loss of their discoveries and developments. And here we need to understand Soros's tactics. He doesn't train fighters. His task is to raise people who will be oriented towards the West. That's why Soros pays such close attention to education, culture, and the media to raise a youth that will be alien to traditional values. Soros didn't overlook the presidents either. The economic advisor first to Gorbachev, and then to Yeltsin was Soros's protege, the American Jeffrey Sachs, who, by the way, now has a slightly different rhetoric. He appeared here after the launch in Poland. Shock therapy is a rapid transition from a planned economy to a market one. Following Sachs's advice, in 1992, all price control measures were abolished. As a result, inflation reached 2,500%, and there was an economic explosion. Corruption prevented the transition to capitalism. They privatized 57% of the enterprise, while the state received only $5 billion, as everything was sold to the oligarchs for a pittance. Soros himself invested in the largest steel mill, Novolipetsk, and in the oil company Sidanko. By 1994, the Soros Fund owned shares in enterprises worth $10 million. Soros spent the most on Sviazinvest, $1,870 million in 1997. To make it clearer, Sviazinvest was the largest telecommunications operator in Russia, controlling 90% of the entire industry. The company's services were used by the FSB, the rocket forces, and the government. At that time, there was a war among the oligarchs, with Potanin and Chubais on one side and Berezovsky and Gusinsky on the other. Soros was actually acting in conjunction with Potanin. But later, he called that deal the worst investment of his life. The crisis hit hard, the stock price fell by 3 times, and in 2004 he sold it for $652 million. There is information that, to prevent Zhuganov from winning in 1996, Soros came to Yeltsin's aid. He personally met with Chubais and proposed to create a group of top businessmen to assist President Yeltsin. It was important for both the Americans and, in quotes, our oligarchs, that Yeltsin win. a clear and predictable person. To continue their dealings, this is how the 7 bankers emerged in Russia, who kept dividing the country's assets. Soros was expelled from Russia only in 2015. The Prosecutor General's office established that his fund poses a threat to the security of the state. But getting rid of him is not that easy. It turns out that Soros is connected to 150 Russian media outlets. These include Novaya Gazeta and TV Rain. He provided financial support to Meduza and Insider, which are recognized as foreign agents. In total, from 2019 to 2021, the fund allocated 54 million rubles to the employees of our so-called media. Another expense of Soros is the organization of color revolutions. For many years, the foundation has been fueling the opposition in various countries around the world. By the way, Soros funded Navalny. This was confirmed by his former employee Alexander Larenkov. It is believed that the first revolution involving Soros took place in 2000, in Yugoslavia. With his money, campaigns against President Slobodan Milosevic were developed, including the youth organization Otpor, which is one of the main forces of the opposition. The activities of Otpor inspired movements in Georgia, and then Kamara emerged, which was also funded by Soros. Activists traveled to Belgrade to study the experience of the bulldozer revolution. Soros even funded the purchase of roses, which became a symbol of the revolution in Georgia. In total, Soros spent $40 million to overthrow Eduard Shevardnadze. A whole group of Soros affiliates came to power in Georgia. President Saakashvili and 4 other ministers who worked in Soros's structures. And even now, as mentioned, Kabakidze, the Prime Minister of Georgia, is a product of that Soros network. In Kyrgyzstan, Soros's activity was recorded twice during the Tulip revolutions in 2005 and 2010. He also achieved success in Armenia during the time of his work. There, he allocated over $48 million to 200 organizations. It was precisely those he sponsored who became the driving force behind the unrest in 2018. Then Soros killed 2 birds with 1 stone, and he brought his own person, Pashinyan, to power, separating Armenia from Russia. Most likely, that was his main goal. Soros basically used all means to incite Russophobia among Armenians. He invested $5 million in just 1 media outlet. He also supported the Arab Spring. As a result, revolutions in Syria, Libya, Yemen, and Tunisia. He funded the opposition in Belarus, Azerbaijan, Croatia, and Macedonia. Well, and Ukraine? Soros takes pride in Ukraine as his most successful project. He, so to speak, made his mark there in 1990 when he created the Renaissance Fund. And since then, he has invested over $230 million there. These are just the official merits of Soros before the authorities regarding the Maidan. It's no coincidence that Poroshenko awarded him the Order of Freedom, one of Ukraine's highest honors. In 2019, Soros ranked second in the list of the most influential people in the country, right after Zelensky. It all started with President Leonid Kravchuk, who in 1994 mandated the authorities to assist the fund. And just 10 years later, Soros's structures changed the government in the country, replacing the undesirable Yanukovych with Yushchenko, for whom they spent $1.5 million. Over the years, a generation has grown up in Ukraine that doesn't know its own history, but has clearly absorbed one thing. They are a supernation, and the Russians are the enemies, who stole everything, including religion, language, and culture. Soros changed the worldview and rewrote history to raise a generation of pro-Western zombies by 2013. Also, after carrying out another coup, Soros gained a free market. The transnational company Monsanto, where he is the main shareholder, filled Kiev with GMO products while also buying up fields and arable land. Soros's ties to Kiev were so close, he wrote a strategy for Poroshenko for a new Ukraine. He gave advice on how to bypass the Minsk agreements on the ceasefire in Donbass and to strengthen the country's military capability. He talked about how friendship with Russia is undesirable and even impossible because of Putin. Soros didn't spare any money on the media that advocated for the idea of a Ukrainian Donbass and the return of Crimea. And only from 2013 to 2015, he spent $44 million on them. He allocated 100,000 separately to 10 journalists who were supposed to smear Russia. As for Zelensky, it can't be said that he is a direct puppet of Soros, but he is surrounded by them. Soros grant recipients and non-profit organization alumni. The truth is, these are managers who themselves need to be managed. Just look at the former Minister of Economic Development Milovanov, who himself admitted that he is an idiot. But they follow the West's orders strictly, at the expense of ordinary Ukrainians. They've even sold off the black soil to foreigners. The name Soros is usually associated with the CIA and the interests of the United States of America. But in fact, their interests only align sometimes. For example, regarding Ukraine. It was said that there are globalists, for example Trump, and there are ultra-globalists, for example Biden, and a struggle between them. That is why Soros calls the United States the main opponent of global institutions. And Soros also wants to bring the United States under his agenda, along with the people who support him. He first interfered in American elections in 2004. Soros stated that George W. Bush's policies are dangerous for the United States and the whole world. And he spent $27 million on anti-publicity against the president. Bush still ended up staying in the White House. But Soros started getting involved with the Democrats. He invested in Obama and Clinton. In the last elections, he spent over $10 million, and he paid for everything that worked against the Republicans. He launched a real media war and continued even after Trump's inauguration. Just think of the massive Women's March. More than 100 groups that organized the protest received funding from Soros. He also funded prosecutor Alvin Bragg, who opened a criminal case against Trump for document forgery. Bragg was basically elected to this position promising to sue the former president. In short, Soros clearly has it out for Trump. He calls him a fraud, a charlatan, and a dictator. Well, we can see Soros still didn't have much luck. With Trump's new election, all branches of power will be controlled by the Republicans. Ultra-globalist trends will clearly be shaken. And here, no amount of money helped. It's generally believed that there is always a fierce struggle between Republicans and Democrats in the United States. In reality, this is a conflict between those very globalists and ultra-globalists for the future of everything. So Bush and Trump are exactly representatives of the globalists, hence the struggle for sovereignty and a strong America. Obama, Clinton, and Biden are puppets of the ultra-globalists, which is why Soros was so hopeful for their victory. Many people hate him, and that includes in the States. In 2017, a petition even appeared on the White House website where Americans asked to recognize Soros as a terrorist and freeze his assets. According to the author, Soros has repeatedly tried to destabilize the situation in the United States and has pursued an anti-American policy. The petition was signed by more than 70,000 people. But it went unnoticed. In general, it would be foolish to think that Soros is acting alone. There are structures behind him that once provided him with funding for certain tasks. They leaked the information, allowed him to make money, and in return, he clearly fulfills the tasks of his curators. Today, Soros is already 94 years old, and he has handed all his affairs over to his son, Alexander. He continues his father's projects, and his work will live on as long as there is an opportunity to infiltrate the politics of nations. Well, who underestimates him? Pays with its independence, gets same-sex marriages, and a world without national interests. Well, that's it, friends. And that's all for now.